people, and that's up about 400 from the year before.
1,259.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way that I would have been able to guess that number. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me, even though, we've been feeling the pressure throughout the last year, and particularly during the colder winter months. But that number was a surprise to me. We're seeing a tremendous amount of pressure for family shelter. We have 12 families in the building at Micah's Mission right now. That's the lowest it's been in probably 8 weeks. It has not been unusual for us to have 16 or 17 families in the building, and we only have 8 family rooms. So it means that those other families are sleeping in the family lounge or the worship center or the dining room. We just are seeing pressure for shelter like we've not seen before.
So I want people to understand the facilities, because everyone thinks, well, you've got this, you've got that. I mean, we've dealt with this. Walk people through what you have to deal with this crisis, to where you've got over 1,200 people in need of what you do.
Yeah, so, we operate 3 shelters. Micah's Mission is the largest, men, women, and families. And it's in a converted furniture store. Those who've been in Fargo-Moorhead a long time may remember it as Plunkett's Furniture. That's our building. We aren't able to utilize the basement for shelter except for extremely limited periods of time, because it's just not set up that way. And so what that means is we're repurposing every nook and cranny we can find for shelter, particularly for families, on the main floor. We have people who come in at night and they sleep in the fold-out chairs in the entryway because we just have to find a place for them. We also operate the Dorothy Day House in Moorhead, which is men's-only shelter, 16 beds. We are full to bursting there all the time. We're always trading people back and forth to see how we can make the overnight piece work. We work very closely with the other shelters when it comes to men. And then in July this last year, we opened Safe Haven, which is emergency overflow for women, up to 27 beds. We try not to go over 25 because it gives us a little bit of wiggle room then on very cold nights. But we're just full everywhere. And, like everyone else, we're really experiencing a staffing crisis. The labor market's very, very tight. And unlike many businesses, where I see that they've reduced hours because they're short on staff, that's just not an option for us. Our shelters are 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operations, and we have to have trained, compassionate team members to take care of the needs of our guests. And that doesn't even start to think about things like food and our kitchen staff and the cost of utilities and snow removal. It has been something else this winter.
I bet. Individual sent in a text to our iConsultants of North Dakota text club at 35270, says, I deliver food to the homeless shelter in Moorhead, and I did that about 1 a.m. last Saturday. And there were people sleeping basically right up next to the exit door in chairs. And so it's exactly what you just described, Pastor Sue.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we have no other option. People have to have a place to be able to get in out of the weather.
How many of these individuals are struggling with the things that I would typically think about? Mental health issues, alcoholism, drug abuse, which to me would add to the trouble you would have once they come through the door, Pastor Sue.
Well, we typically see a pretty high ratio of folks that are struggling with mental health issues or addiction. Increasingly, we see people who are struggling with chronic physical illness in addition to that. The pandemic has been really, really difficult for folks who experience mental illness because of the isolation, and that has really been intensified during this time.
How did people treat Churches United during Giving Hearts Day? Did you do well?
We did. People are so generous, and we're so grateful, as always, for the support of the community. We had a really good Giving Hearts Day, and especially since what we received this year wasn't earmarked for a building project. It went to general operations, which is really where we continue to need the most support. It's expensive to pay staff and to provide for what folks need.
You and I have been doing this for a while, and the 30 seconds I have left, I have to tell you folks, it's money. It isn't clothes. It's money. If you want to help out, it's money. By the way, I'm the one that picked out that the money from our football pool in our office here went to you. Now, I know it wasn't that much, but it felt good knowing that every week when I won against everyone else, the money was going to you. How do you like that?
I like that. That's great, healthy competition, and we are always grateful for monetary support.
All right.
It just helps everything go. 5
seconds. How do they get in touch with you?
www.churches-united.org, or they can call my line, 218-656-7032.
Alexander Vindman is going to join us when we get back. Yes, that Alexander Vindman.
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the Mighty 790. Couch Potato Radio. Did you see that from It Takes Two? Doug here with the morning crew this morning. News Radio. Eiler with It Takes Two. This is Jack Michaels, Voices Forces. Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Access, your home.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page, and send us a text anytime at 35270.
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out, and just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just getting the greatest good. We're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. And all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night, the hospital last night, and I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. That's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to address.
So today on MSUM campus, we're doing an ice jam, which is we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate but also have a sense of
recipient. This is a man who sat there in front of Congress with the nation's eyes upon him and wasn't afraid to tell what he knew, knowing that he was going to pay and his family was going to pay one heck of a personal price for it. The reason that I am fortunate enough to speak to the retired Lieutenant Colonel today and the former Director for European Affairs for the United States National Security Council, the reason that it's a real treat for me to be able to do this and understand Director for European Affairs is because he understands Ukraine. He understands the relationship they have with Russia. And so, Mr. Vindman, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Well, that's quite an introduction. I appreciate it, Joe. Looking forward to this conversation. And please call me Alex.
Okay. Alex, it just, I meant every doggone word I said. There, that's how we talk here in the upper Midwest. In terms of where we're at today with Ukraine, describe to people what you see from the outside looking in with the knowledge that you have.
Well, so right now, over the past couple of days, the scenario that I've been deeply concerned about for the past couple of months has started to unfold, beyond the conceptual phase. This is now facts on the ground being established. Vladimir Putin, just a couple of days ago, had this rant, like this unhinged rant about how Ukraine doesn't exist. It's a fabricated state, and he went into this lengthy history. This is actually, in a lot of ways, something not new. He's written long articles about this. He's been saying this for years. He has this deep sense of the fact that only a few countries like the U.S., Russia, and China are sovereign. Everybody else is beholden to those states. He doesn't believe in this concept of sovereignty and independence, and that countries have the right to determine their own orientation. So he was talking about this, and he basically laid out this case for a large-scale war against Ukraine to hold it back into Russian sphere of influence. And he started with an announcement that these two territories, these Russian-controlled territories where Russia has been fighting a war against Ukraine for the past 8 years, he's declared them independent unilaterally. So he's like, okay, now I believe you're independent. And he's rolled forces into those areas. And he also declared that these territories are a fraction of, let's say, their entire state boundaries. They amount to about a third of it. And he said that I see it as the entire state boundary. So he's already telegraphing that he's getting ready to conduct an offensive to realize these larger boundaries, and that there's a larger war coming. So we're on the cusp of something seismic, an earthquake in geopolitics, where there's going to be a large-scale war in Europe. There's not been anything like this since World War II. It's going to have a catastrophic human toll with thousands and thousands of casualties, with tens of thousands of refugees, aerial bombardments, cruise missile strikes. This will be a real war shaping up, and the Ukrainians are getting ready to fight and defend their country. But they're largely on their own, unfortunately, in doing so.
I'm going to speculate or actually say some of my opinions in some of these questions. And Alex, you can go ahead and filter that because you're a man that's based upon fact. But in the last, 4 years or prior to this administration, NATO was really, in my opinion, not something where individuals were getting along. Countries were actually feeling strong about NATO. Going in now, much of what we're basing our response on is based off of NATO. So walk me through that. Does NATO still have the ability to bring countries together to make and to force a response to this?
I believe so. I think, if anything, the facts of you shouldn't necessarily associate NATO with the EU. They're different organizations. One's oriented on security. One's oriented on kind of political and economic prosperity. But what we see is a consensus around Russian aggression, around the fact that Russia is going to destabilize European security and stability, and that Vladimir Putin's efforts to undo, all these guardrails and all these international agreements that has allowed the U.S. and the EU to prosper since World War II, that does not happen without a cost. So these sanctions that came out yesterday from the U.S. side, from the EU side, they're punitive sanctions. They're intended to punish Russia for its transgressions and also deter a future aggression. I don't think they're going to have that deterrent value, but I think they do. They are intended to punish Russia. And then just on the NATO facet itself, NATO is a pretty powerful organization. The budget is significant for NATO, especially when you roll in U.S. contributions. It has potent capabilities, but it also is a consensus-based organization. That means you need to have all the parties, all 30 nations, agree on an approach. And it looks like we actually have that kind of coherence that that Russia poses a major threat. This is not something that's existed historically. We may share the same values and interests with NATO and our European allies, but we had drastically different threat perceptions. A lot of our NATO allies had a more benign view of Russia's orientation and what it was going to do. They've now cast that aside. They now believe that Russia is a major threat, and they seem to be prepared to act in accordance with that assessment.
You know, there was a sense out there that Germany might have a problem with some of what we're talking about, though, because when you look at what was happening with the pipeline to Germany, one of the big questions is, will they hold tight on that? Will they stop construction of that? Will they, with the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline, will they be a team player in making Russia pay the price? And so that was something everybody was waiting on, Mr. Vindman.
Yep. So we now actually have some clarity, and this goes to show, really, frankly, that there was a divide in the thinking about Russia. Russia and Germany have a very, very significant economic cooperation. They have robust trade. The same thing with regards to France and Russia. The Eastern partners are less, let's say, invested in the economic cooperation. They're more concerned about a rising Russia that's threatening their security. And there was some ambiguity about how Western Europe was going to react, so France and Germany. And as of yesterday, it's clear now that we're basically moving to the same page. Germany is going to cancel the certification of Nord Stream 2. They've already declared that. They have to go through this kind of legalistic process, but that's it. It's done. Nord Stream 2 is gone. And these discussions about whether Nord Stream 2 was just an economic venture, where Germany needed that gas supply to keep its economic engine going, those have been cast aside. They now realize that Russia was using this as a means to apply pressure on Germany and get them to bend to Russian will. So it's good to see Germany staying on sides and really being part of the team here in pushing back on Russian aggression.
Before all of this, before the invade, and is it safe to say, or I'll let you say it, has Russia invaded Ukraine?
Absolutely.
There.
So it's interesting. There's a bit of a legalistic kind of analysis here. Russia has been waging war on Ukraine since 2014. But in the first 8 years of the war, up until recently, there's been a kind of a patina, like a thin veneer of deniability that the Russians weren't involved. Anybody that pays attention knows that Russia was controlling those forces. Russia was arming those forces. They were basically puppet regimes, puppet militaries with Russian military leadership embedded at every significant echelon of these military forces in these Eastern Ukrainian provinces, Lugansk and Donetsk. But they were saying that we're not there. This is an internal civil struggle, which is frankly it was a lie. But they were saying that now they have declared that these are independent countries, and they're the only country that recognizes these territories. And they've now invaded sovereign Ukrainian territory. So they put Russian forces inside Ukraine without Ukraine's approval, and that's an invasion. That might look a little bit different than what people were kind of initially expecting, which is a massive military offensive. but we should think about this in phases. We're just in the initial phases of Russia's invasion, and it's going to be a powerful invasion that's going to continue to roll through for the next days and weeks. That's going to culminate in this massive military attack. This is just the initial stages of this invasion. And sometimes I think what's important for your listeners is that we think that it's a world away, it's far away. But you in your introduction, you talked about Ukrainians in the Midwest. They've been a key part of the tapestry of the United States. We have nearly 1 million U.S. citizens that come from Ukrainian stock. But it's not even just that. It's not even just the fact that Ukraine's fighting for its independence. It's on freedom's frontier, trying to fend off an authoritarian regime and really a change to the way the world functions, where somehow we return back to the rules of the 19th century. Decades past of strength and might makes right, often referred to as the rules of the jungle. It's more than that. There's all of that. There's the fact that the other adversaries are going to read the tea leaves and take similar action. But I think there's something else. I mean, this is not likely to stay limited. We already see multiple NATO partners offering, because they feel a deep sense of insecurity about Russia's military buildup, support to Ukraine. And that's not just kind of like supplies. That's military support to Ukraine. And the question is, what does Russia do with that? Does Russia allow safe havens outside of Ukraine when it's fighting a war and sustaining casualties? Or does it strike? Does it strike with cyber weapons, which don't necessarily have a direct impact on lives, although they can now? Clearly, the whole world is connected, and major disruptions could affect medical, telecommunications, all sorts of other stuff. But they may very well consider other options, going after safe havens. Mm-hmm. The refugee flows going into Europe are going to be immense. They're going to destabilize the region. How does Europe respond to that? Do they accept the fact that Russia is the cause of this and let that slide and just deal with the consequences? Or do they try to root out the issues? And then, of course, the economic impacts that you've heard the president talk about. Most relevantly is the oil and gas prices. Russia is a major provider of oil. It's going to result in disruptions to the oil supply and gas supply to Europe. But there are other things. I mean, I mentioned cyber. Cyber is one of those things that spills over. It doesn't stay limited. Today, I've been hearing reports of cyber attacks on the Army's internet infrastructure and stuff like that. These things are going to have effects on Americans.
Alexander Vindman is our guest. He is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, and he was Director for Eastern Europe when it comes to basically giving the information to the National Security Council. So when we come back, what I want to know from him is how we got to here, how our relationship with Russia got to this point. Stick around. More coming your way on News and Views.
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out. Right. And just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just getting the greatest good. When we're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. And all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night, the hospital last night, and I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. That's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to address.
Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page, and send us a text anytime at 35270.
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the
Jenkinson, Couch Potato Radio. Did you see that?
It Takes Two.
Doug Miller with the morning crew this morning.
Jerkins News Radio. Eiler with It Takes Two.
This is Jack Michaels, Voices Forces. Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Access, your home.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
So today on MSUM campus we're doing an ice jam, which is we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate but also have a sense of
Asked, he knows something about it. He used to be the individual that was in charge and made sure that the information got to our National Security Council. Alex, I have to ask you this. President Zelensky said that if we're going to put sanctions on, put them on. If we're going to use that as a deterrent, that should have happened prior to the invasion. Your thoughts on that?
I think that's right. It's interesting. On the National Security Council, the role of the National Security Council is to pull together the entirety of the U.S. government, this massive, enormous government apparatus, and coordinate policy. And you do that, you start at my level, which is a pretty darn senior level. It's the deputy assistant secretaries, and you work your way up to the cabinet level to make sure that we have a clear, concise, synchronized policy. And then you also do that with allies. So I understand the work that's going on behind the scenes, and there's been some pretty fantastic coordination with our allies to make sure that we're on the same page, that we all levy heavy sanctions to try to take action against Ukraine. But it is, in fact, punitive actions. I think President Zelensky, I had a chance to meet him. He's an interesting guy. He's a comedian by background and an entertainer, but he's a quick study. He's definitely gotten himself up to speed now. He believes that these sanctions should have come in a graduated manner months ago, and along with forced posture changes, our troops to Eastern Europe to secure our NATO allies, where we have deep obligations, as well as the arms going to Ukraine. Those things should have started happening a while ago, and they would have deterrent effects. Now they're coming in late in response to Russian actions. So those are more punitive sanctions. So I think he definitely has a solid point that we're being reactive, and there's more that we should be doing to try to deter. I think the possibility of deterring Russian aggression is just about nil at this point, but there's still some things we should be doing. So we should be providing. Yeah, I was just going to quickly say we should be providing Ukraine with additional military support so that they could defend themselves. We should be providing them with logistical support for when they fight this war, so that they could sustain themselves for the coming weeks of combat. and that would potentially have, along with these sanctions, still have a small chance of having a deterrent effect and warning Russia off.
Should we be standing next to them when they fight this war? I have about 40 seconds here.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that right now. We're in the midst of a confrontation that could spiral in any number of directions. We should have been more ambiguous of what we were going to do. Taking the boots off the ground back in December was a bad idea. We wanted the Russians to be deeply concerned about the risks of this confrontation becoming bilateral, and we should have left it ambiguous. But now to put troops in Ukraine would be particularly dangerous because it would be provocative. It's something that our allies might be able to do, and it would be less provocative. So NATO could put troops on the ground, but the U.S. would be too risky, I think, at this moment.
We need to take a step back, folks, and as Mr. Vindman said, we've got a huge footprint of Ukrainians here. He stated over 1 million people. We have some of them in North Dakota, which can speak very well to some of these issues as well. How did we get to this point in our relationship with Russia? That's my question of him when we come back.
So today on MSUM campus, we're doing an ice jam, we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate, but also have a sense of
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out, and just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just getting the greatest good. We're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. And all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night. Got out of the hospital last night, and I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. That's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to address.
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the
Derek Hansen, Couch Potato Radio. Did you see that?
It Takes Two.
Doug Miller with the morning crew this morning.
News Radio. Amy Eiler with It Takes Two.
This is Jack Michaels, Voices Forces. Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Access, your home.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page, and send us a text anytime at 35270. Alexander Vindman is a man that got it done for this country in so many different ways. Former director for European Affairs for the United States National Security Council. He's with us right now, and I made the comment earlier that America seems to make its policy lately based upon, and its decision based upon an administration. That every 4 years we kind of change things in regards to how we respond to NATO. And I had somebody take me to the woodshed on that. They said that's not true. It's just the 4 years prior to this that really shook things up. And so my question of you, Alex, is how did we get here? How did we get to this point in our relationship with Russia?
Sure. So historically, there's this mantra from Senator Vandenberg that said, "Politics end at our nation's shore." That is held true, for decades. Unfortunately, I think as everything has become politicized, so too has our foreign policy. The last 4 years were a particular nightmare. While the U.S. government, all the professionals were moving in one direction around U.S. national security interests, President Trump was serving his own personal interests and seeking to gain an advantage in the 2020 election cycle. He tried to do that in what resulted in his impeachment the first time, and then carried it through with this big lie about stolen elections and an insurrection. So that's part of the story, but it's actually deeper than that. For at least 2 decades, we've had this policy of looking the other way when Russia was backsliding with its democracy, as it became increasingly assertive and belligerent, as it attacked U.S. and Euro-Atlantic national security interests, poisoning people with nuclear material or chemical agents or assassinations. And we thought that our deep interests with regard to Russia and our desire to make progress on the nuclear agenda, not denuclearization, but arms control, climate change, all these other issues should take precedence over these infractions, major infractions with regards to democracy, including wars against places like Georgia. And what you have is a situation where Russia took the message of, okay, we could get away with it. We will not bear a cost. Vladimir Putin started to believe that he could act with impunity. So that bill of not taking Russia to account is now coming due. We consistently bought down short-term risk, this idea of criticizing Russia or taking action against Russia early on, and delayed to pay the bill now. And now that bill is coming due, and now it directly implicates U.S. national security. I take the time in the book that I had come out this summer, I take the time to explain some of this history with regards to U.S.-Russia relations and how the Russians have been effective at getting the U.S. to self-deter. And fortunately, I'm working on my doctorate at Johns Hopkins right now, and this is exactly the topic I'm writing about. I'm writing about the history of U.S. relations towards Russia, towards Ukraine, since 1991, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the complexity of these issues and the U.S. shortfalls with regards to national security and foreign policy.
I have to tell you this. My wife read your book, and you want to talk about jealous. Talk to her when you say, I get a chance to visit with you today. And she's texting me during this because she's enjoying this conversation quite a bit. So your book, there's a reason. It's a bestseller. Does Vladimir Putin fear us after seeing what roles that he could play in our government itself? Does he fear the United States and our might anymore?
Yeah. So he fears U.S. power. I've been in these rooms when the stakes were high, when U.S. missiles were flying into bases in Syria occupied by Russian forces. I've been around when Russian forces attacked U.S. special operations in Syria, and we killed 300 of them in a effort of self-defense. They were deathly afraid of U.S. power. What he's not afraid of, though, is where he sees a great opportunity is this division that the former president and the Trumpers and the far right have woven into U.S. politics. And having the president yesterday basically bandwagon and cheer for Putin, Tucker Carlson constantly pander to Putin, begging and pleading for interviews and stuff like that. That's where he sees a great deal of opportunity. And frankly, that's where these folks will ultimately, they are digging their own graves. Because what they don't realize right now, it's all academic, this theory of war. They haven't seen war up close firsthand and how catastrophic that is. When there are thousands of casualties, when American citizens start to die, these folks that were complicit and were basically cheering on Vladimir Putin, talking about how brilliant and how brave he is, will be responsible, and they will own it. They will own the fact that they helped drive Putin towards this view that there's an opportunity to attack U.S. interests without consequence. And they don't realize it because they're being short-sighted, but they will own it.
A question comes in and says, what if the Democrats, because President Trump yesterday talking about Vladimir Putin using the word genius, what if the Democrats back after 9/11 had praised Osama bin Laden? And I think it's a fair comparison, Alex. I mean,
Yep.
You say that this ends at the ocean shore. What if they had praised Osama bin Laden? I mean, it's that bad what happened yesterday.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Of course, in that scenario, you basically have an attack on the United States, and then there's a rally around the flag. It's almost like the Republicans are falling into a trap due to their short-sightedness, due to the infection of Donald Trump into the party, where they don't know that this is coming and this is going to be a catastrophe, and they're being kind of lured in, and the blow is about to fall, and then just days before, you'll see Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, Marsha Blackburn, a bunch of other folks cheering, and Mike Pompeo cheering on Putin, and they will own it. It's fascinating, and it's hard to believe that these guys, with their political instincts and their self-preservation and their desire to advance their careers at any cost, don't see what they're doing. That they're cheering on a catastrophic war that's going to drastically affect U.S. national security interests, U.S. standing, and be a catastrophic human toll. And they're just going to pay the price because of their short-sighted.
I think of my father, who fought in World War II, and the water's edge, it ended. I mean, you were all one. You were in the foxhole together, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Catholic, Lutheran. It didn't matter. You were together when it came to that. And yesterday was just, to me, so appalling. The other question I have to ask you, and I know that you've given us more time than what we asked for in the beginning, but China, what role China plays in this, how big of a strength that is in the decisions that Russia is making right now.
Sure. So I think there's definitely some clarity around Russia's actions here, believing that they have China in their corner. They've been what's the good word for it? They've basically been courting China for years now, building this closer relationship. And they think that the Russians think, or Putin thinks, that when the blows start to fall with regards to sanctions, he has China in his corner. They've built this kind of economic network where sanctions are not going to be as powerful, in addition to the fact that Putin's built a $630 billion war chest. But I think that's actually short-sighted. It's too early to tell how the Chinese are going to respond. The tone in the UN Security Council meeting called just the other day was one of restraint. So it wasn't one of endorsement for Russia, and it wasn't one of endorsement for Russia's declaration of recognition for these states. But I think it would be terribly short-sighted of China to not realize the repercussions of not being an active participant, not getting Russia to take a more restrained position. Because we have to remember, China is a rising power. It's a rising superpower. But it's a rising superpower because it's been a part of the international system. It's benefited from trade, from being a member of the World Trade Organization. It's benefited from the stability of the international system. It's benefited from the stability of having robust relationships with stable trading partners. Russia is about to ruin that, and this comes during a time where China is facing its own challenges, its own fiscal and budgetary challenges, and internal kind of discontent within the regime. And if they sit this one out, they're also going to pay a huge cost for this. And they're not going to be there in Russia's corner the way the Russians think they are, because they don't want to be dragged down in the same direction. They don't want to be, potentially subject to sanctions for violating these sanctions that the U.S. and Euro-Atlantic community are imposing. So I'd like to see the Chinese take for self-preservation purposes, a much more kind of thoughtful approach. But right now they're kind of sitting out on the sidelines, offering tepid criticism.
I realize no one can answer this, but I have to ask it, just based upon your knowledge, and I realize it's opinion, but how do you think this ends?
I think this ends, unfortunately, and I wrote a piece in Foreign Affairs on this. It ends with a human catastrophe, a major war in Europe that could have potentially been averted if we had taken a much more assertive position over the course of a couple of decades. If we didn't have the reversals and the weakness that Donald Trump kind of bred into the system over the previous administration's 4 years, and we just have to be prepared for the consequences, and those consequences are going to be greater instability, greater challenges to U.S. interests. We're going to have to not just manage our affairs carefully in a kind of a difficult geopolitical environment of today. It's going to be one after a major war in which other adversaries, other authoritarian regimes see opportunity and they make their own territorial grabs. So I think it's just going to be a very, very complex. And I'm sorry. And the other thing is, we definitely want to try to avoid this conflict from becoming bilateral. Russia is the only country in the world that can destroy us. And we could have probably done more to avoid the situation before it happened. Now we have to live with the reality that there's a major war being fought, and we just have to be extremely careful on how we manage affairs, and we don't get dragged into another European war like we did twice in the 20th century. And we might very well end up being there anyway.
What do you answer to individuals who say that it was Barack Obama who lost and allowed Crimea to be taken?
That's a completely false premise. I think, if anything, you could. I would go ahead and take a look at a deeper history. So what ended up happening under, and then this is I'm studying this, so it has nothing to do with politics. But part of the reason that Russia took those actions were in response to the Bush administration's half measures, not too far, but not far enough, with this idea of bringing Ukraine into NATO. So they, in this Bucharest summit in 2008, they basically said Ukraine and Georgia will eventually join NATO. And Russia's reaction to that, because they said that they wanted a sphere of influence, they declared this a couple times, Putin declared it a couple times, was to actually say, okay, well, you're not giving us that, so we're going to go use military force to achieve our objectives. So they waged war in Georgia, and there was a fairly late response. I think the Obama administration suffered from the same kind of short-sightedness that I think other administrations suffered, where they thought that they could reset relations and there was more to accomplish with Russia than in reality we could, because you have to have a willing partner. You can't just have your aspirations for what you want to accomplish when the other side is going to be obstructionist or opportunist. That's why we could have probably invested in our relationship with Ukraine, because at least Ukraine was a willing partner for that entire period. And I think there's something to be said. None of these recent administrations have been particularly effective with regards to challenging Russia, but I think they all bear equal. They all bear kind of an equal. What's the word I'm looking for? Responsibility for how things have turned out now.
His book is titled "Here Right Matters: An American Story." It's a bestseller, and it's definitely worth your time. Alexander Vindman, thank you for giving us more time than I asked for. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Joel. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners. I don't often get the opportunity to talk to Midwesterners and kind of talk about these issues that are so central to U.S. security. Thank you again.
Very, very impressive, man. When we come back, your thoughts on it. 1-800-880-5346.
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the
Jenkinson, Couch Potato Radio. Did you see that?
It Takes Two.
Doug Miller with the morning crew this morning.
Jerkins News Radio. Eiler with It Takes Two.
This is Jack Michaels, Voices Forces. Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Access, your home.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out, and just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just getting the greatest good. We're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. And all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night, the hospital last night, and I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. That's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to address.
So today on MSUM campus, we're doing an ice jam, which is we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate but also have a sense of
Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page, and send us a text anytime at 35270. Markets by going to our farm and ranch director, who, by the way, will be in Morton tomorrow. It is Time for our Coffee with KFGO, the home base of the News and Views Radio Network. Thank you to Vision Ford. We'll be at the Antelope Creek. Stop by. Coffee, rolls, juice, all of that is on us, and they got a great breakfast menu waiting for you as well. Sarah, what's going on in our markets right now?
We are seeing some upward movement right now in that grain market, with May corn up a penny and a half at $6.74, December at $6.08, up 2 1/4. May wheat climbs 7 1/4 higher at $9.95, September at $9.67, a dime and a quarter higher. May soybeans up 26 cents at $16.62, new crop November at $14.84, up a dime and 3/4. In the cattle market, trending lower. April feeder cattle down 20 cents at $168.93. April live cattle a dime lower at $145.93. And for April lean hogs, $2.50 lower at $109.58. With your markets, I'm Farm and Ranch Director Sarah Heinrich for the News and Views Radio Network from the Enterprise Sales Ag Studio. Enterprise Sales of LA City, your grain handling and storage experts.
I want to get to some of these text messages in our Eye Consultants of North Dakota text club after Alexander Vindman gave us time. It said many wars, if not all, have been started as a result of a mistake. My fear is that the Ukrainian situation puts us in a precarious place with major ramifications as it goes on. Another one. Wow, what an honorable man. Very, very refreshing to hear what he had to say. Another one, why not park 2 aircraft carriers and a few subs so they see them and let them know we're ready to work through this through diplomacy. Another one, with all due respect to the colonel, they will own nothing. Now, remember what he said during that interview. He talked about these individuals that are providing aid in verbiage to Vladimir Putin, that they then would own it. And this individual saying they will blame it on Biden, no matter how many awful American deaths happen. You know, last night, Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin a genius. That what he did was genius. I was so repulsed by that. It was so disgusting with what is going on and the people whose lives are about to be in danger to give a wet kiss to Vladimir Putin and to send that signal that, hey, I'm your friend. That was just disgusting. We'll be back with more right after this. Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page and send us a text anytime at 35270.
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the Mighty 790. Radio. Did you see that? It Takes Two. Doug Miller with the morning crew this morning. Paul Jerkins News Radio.
Eiler with It Takes Two.
This is Jack Michael, Voices Forces.
Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Access, your home.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
So today on the MSUM campus, we're doing an ice jam, which is we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate, but also have a sense of
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out, and just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just getting the greatest good. When we're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. And all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night. Got out of the hospital last night, and I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. That's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to address.
great core. He's an individual that gets information out there, has been in front of classrooms, has been in front of the public, and just wants people to know more about where we live and how we live and the history. He spoke out, and the work that I seen from him recently is about the footprint of Ukraine here in North Dakota and Ukrainians in what they've played as a role in our state. And that's why I asked him to come on. I just wanted a chance to visit with him. Clay, good to have you back on News and Views.
My delight to be here.
The obvious question is this, and I don't think people know that. I don't think they understand what a footprint Ukrainians have here in North Dakota. Speak to that, if you will.
So there's a large Ukrainian population here. Of course, they're Ukrainian Americans now and descendants of pioneers who came at the end of the 19th and the early part of the 20th century. And they concentrate around the Belfield-Wilton area in western North Dakota. But also there's a second Ukrainian population that's Lutheran. It's not Ukrainian Orthodox. That's the Belfield-Wilton segment of it. But the other portion is Lutheran, and they're near Russo and Butte and Keefe, or near Dogden Butte, in the kind of Harvey-Velva portion of the state. So you have these two different religious groups, one Lutheran, one Ukrainian Orthodox. Anyone who's traveled out here has seen the sort of the onion-domed church in Belfield or on U.S. Highway 85 north of Belfield, but there's also one in Wilton. And these are very proud people who came here from a very difficult part of the world and have become prosperous. Their culture is beautiful and dynamic. Everyone is aware of Ukrainian Easter eggs. Belfield is sort of almost the national center of the Ukrainian Easter egg craft work. And so this is a very important part of North Dakota life. And the reason that I've been thinking about this, Joel, is that, we think of Ukraine and Hunter Biden, and we think of Ukraine and Donald Trump, and we think of Ukraine in all sorts of ways, but it's kind of almost like an other world, or not. We don't think of it the same way we think of France or Germany or Great Britain or Italy. It somehow has some kind of a almost off the map kind of feel to most Americans. But we North Dakotans know better than that, because we know these Ukrainian descendants, and they're outstanding farmers and great tradesmen and wonderful citizens.
So why here? Is it the geography, the landscape that was so familiar to them based upon where they came from? I mean, why did they decide to call here home?
That's such a great question, and I have an answer to it, amazingly enough. So they came here because they could, because this was the railroads had come here. The Great Northern had come here later than the Northern Pacific. We have two transcontinental railroads. And I hate to say this, but much of the better land in Iowa and Minnesota and Indiana had already been taken. And so there were still homesteads available in North Dakota at this time. And I'll never forget, Joel, I took these photographs of, 40 different Ukrainians and Ukrainian couples. It was one of the great projects of my life, the black and white photographs. I've got them on my Facebook site now, some of them. And I went up to this farm near Watford City on the kind of the edge of the Badlands and had dinner. They served me this magnificent Ukrainian meal. And the woman said, of the couple said, this is not the best land in the world. We've managed to make a living on it. We're mostly ranchers. We have some crop. And I said, I tried to be delicate. I said, does it bother you that you came so late to this country that you didn't get the prime kind of land that exists in the Red River Valley or in Iowa? And I'll never forget what she said. She looked me right in the face and she said, back in Ukraine, our family would work for generations and maybe get an acre or maybe even 5 acres of land if we worked just day and night for generations. Here in America, we got 160 acres for a filing fee. She said it's like paradise. It's like a kingdom when you're from Ukraine. Of course, we would prefer to have richer land, but we have 160 acres of America. We feel like this is you Americans take this for granted. We don't. And I'll never forget that, Joel, because you realize how fortunate we Americans have been.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Clay, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. No, well, A, how fortunate we've been, but B, what a beacon of hope America has been and continues to be for people who don't have what we have and don't enjoy the rights and the due process that we have.
Yeah, I got ahead of myself there, Clay. I'm sorry about that. Let me ask this, and here's the premise of my question. The town I grew up in, Matador, as a kid, very Catholic community. It wasn't far away. It was Missouri Synod Lutheran. The boys didn't go with the girls. The girls didn't go with the boys. They finally, I think, grew out of that, and the parents finally grew up. But what price did the Ukrainians pay for being here with the neighbors? How are they looked upon? How did they interact with the other people here in the upper Midwest?
Well, we are rich in North Dakota because we have Germans, we have Finns, we have Norwegians, of course, we have Germans from Russia, we have Black Russians, we have a variety of Germans who, for one reason or another, wound up in Ukraine or in Russia, in the Black Sea area, and all of these different groups came to North Dakota. And so we have 1920, I think that we had the largest percentage of foreign-born residents of any state in America. So we have been really deeply rich in our ethnic heritage. And just to jump ahead, our current xenophobia and America firstism and bigotry, the stuff you have to talk about every day, is such a betrayal of the North Dakota spirit, because if any state has been made by ethnic diversity, it is the state of North Dakota. So to the specifics of your question, Joel, the Ukrainian Lutherans had a little better shot, right, because they were Lutheran. And so that's something we immediately recognized. And farming was the whole way of life in North Dakota at the time when they came. The Orthodox Ukrainians, with their onion bulb churches and so on, a slightly different dress, they had a slightly more difficult time, but not much, because the main point is we have always, until very recently, been a family farm state. And these are incredible family farmers. They work extremely hard. When I toured this for about a whole year, I'd go milking with them, or I'd go out on the tractor with them. And the tractors didn't have cabs back then. These were just open tractors. And these are just as hardworking as any other North Dakotans, and maybe harder working, because they were suddenly given this extraordinary opportunity of both religious freedom and economic possibility. And so they melded in really well. And they didn't make any they made no issue of their otherness. They didn't in any way separate. They did tend to marry within, and continue to marry within to a large extent that ethnic community, which is great because it keeps it alive. And I should just say, for those in the Red River Valley, there's a Ukrainian Cultural Center in Jenkinson, which is of national importance, and it was created by a woman named Agnes Polonuk, who is maybe the most important Ukrainian cultural spokesperson in North Dakota history.
Clay, can you give me a little more time? Of
course.
I'm really curious about how, and think about this, between the break here. My dad lived with his grandmother for much of his years that he became a man, and she spoke German, but she wouldn't let him. He understood it, but because of the fact that she called this home now, she didn't want him speaking German. And I'm curious how the Ukrainian people dealt with that. So hang with me, Clay, if you would. What a treasure to just get a chance to visit with him about this. Let's head to Don Haney in the newsroom and talk to him about what's going on in our weather out there.
Well, we get a little break, that's for sure, Joel, after...
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out. And just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just getting the greatest good. We're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. You know, and all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night. Got out of the hospital last night. And I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. You know, that's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to address.
Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page, and send us a text anytime at 35270.
So today on MSUM campus we're doing an ice jam, which is we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate but also have a sense of
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the
Derek Hansen, Couch Potato Radio. Did you see that?
It Takes Two.
Doug Miller with the morning crew this morning.
Jerkins News Radio.
Katie Eiler with It Takes Two.
This is Jack Michael, Voices Forces. Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Axis, your host.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
A little more time, so we get to visit with him. Before the break, we talked about how Ukrainian people assimilated into North Dakota. But before I get to that, I want to bring up Clay, one of the people in our text club that sent us notice that they don't want us to forget the Ukrainian settlement in Pembina. And I think that oftentimes people, they want their area mentioned. And, of course, there was one there, Clay, or is one there.
Fair enough. I apologize. There's a huge Ukrainian population in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, too. And there's some cross-fertilization between the two cultures. I was recently at a festival in Winnipeg in which we went to a Ukrainian event. And the food, I can't tell you how great. The food is braided bread and pig's feet, and when they bring out the pig's feet, they're in this kind of gelatinous kind of pan, and you just think, no way am I eating that, and it turns out to be as delicious as anything you've ever eaten. This is a really rich and proud culture, and of course Pembina is part of it.
I would die for that meal. I would love to sit down with that and just make sure that I tied into all the history of it. Believe me, my father taught me how to eat pickled pig's feet and other things like that. Clay, I want to ask you how they assimilated in. And I gave you the example before the break of how my great-grandmother spoke German but would not let my dad speak German around her. Because it was like, look, you're an American. You need to learn English. You need to speak English. How did the Ukrainian individuals do?
Well, they've hung on to their culture more successfully than many Norwegians have done, or Finns, or other groups. It's a very proud culture, and they have really embraced it. So I really celebrate that. If you've ever been to see the Easter eggs of Belfield, it just makes your knees buckle at the beauty and artistry and the food and so on. I was married in a wedding reception on U.S. Highway 85 at Club 85, and my friend Agnes Paulina gave us a Ukrainian reception, and it was one of the most extraordinary and moving things that I've ever experienced. But these people also know that their lives back in Ukraine were very, very, very difficult. In fact, it's almost a nightmare scenario, and they've distanced themselves from the geography of Ukraine. They've become fully assimilated into the American dream, like everybody else. And really, not to go too deep into the historical weeds on this, Joel, but the two world wars really cut people off from their European origins. They were so nightmarish that people turned and lost some of their accents, moved more into assimilation, became more militantly American and less willing to cling to the past. This is certainly true of my grandparents, and they stopped singing Silent Night in German after the Second World War.
That, Clay, is a marvelous point. That is a wonderful point about, when you come from such an area, when I speak to people of Irish descent, what they heard from their forefathers and mothers, and you forget how incredibly fortunate we are, as you said earlier, to get a quarter of land. And to be able to make sure that you can succeed on that, then it just comes down to hard work, quite frankly.
Well, they know hard work. I'll tell you what, when I toured with these people, I would do chores with them. That was one way to earn their willingness to be photographed. And I had some agricultural background in my life, but not a lot. I've hauled some bales, but not too many. And so I did chores with them, and they're up at dawn, and they're working extremely hard. And they're a simple people. I don't mean that in a condescending way. They're basic. They know what matters in life, that land matters. Land really matters. A herd of cows matters. Dogs and sheep and pigs matter. Having enough food on the table matters. And that's why I posted these things and got your attention, Joel, that what's going on in Ukraine today is an international catastrophe and tragedy. And we need to realize that the people there are these same people. That they're the same people. They just live in a different zip code, and we can't see them as the other, as some strange foreign land where the Bidens have economic interests and Trump is trying to intimidate somebody. These are people that have the same dreams we have. They want their children to thrive. They want their children's lives to be better than theirs. They want to have enough food to put on the table, and above all, they want security to know that tomorrow morning life is going to go on as it always has. And the people of Ukraine cannot guarantee that tomorrow because of what Putin is doing. And we should be absolutely standing up as firmly as NATO can to make sure he doesn't do this to these innocent people.
Yeah. Well said. Clay, I hope people find your work. I love it. We're going to do this more often if I can talk you into it.
Hey, anytime. I'm going to send you my book, The Language of Cottonwoods. It's all about this sort of thing, and I'm going to get a copy into your hands, and maybe we can talk it through.
Yeah, you bet. I would really enjoy that. Thank you, sir.
God bless everyone.
Yep. When we come back, we're going to talk to the truckers. Derek DePaul is going to join us. He is the lead trucker or truck coordinator for the I-94 route from and with the Freedom Convoy. And so let's get his take. Let's find out why they're doing what they're doing, and how they feel this is going to, as they've already made their point or are still making their point, how they think this is going to end. And so let's visit with an individual who is the lead coordinator for that Freedom Convoy right after this.
So today on MSUM campus, we're doing an ice jam, which is we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate but also have a sense of
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the
Jenkinson, Couch Potato Radio. Did you see that?
It Takes Two.
Doug here with the morning crew this morning.
Jerkins News Radio.
Eiler with It Takes Two.
This is Jack Michaels, Voices Forces. Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Access, your home.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out. And just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just giving the greatest good. We're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. And all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night. Got out of the hospital last night, and I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. That's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to address.
Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page, and send us a text anytime at 35270. area in North Dakota that has a real footprint when it comes to Ukrainians. Joel, I'm a full-blooded Ukrainian that grew up in the community of Keefe on the farm that my great-grandpa homesteaded. Our people belong to a religious sect of evangelical Christians known as Stundist. And I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. Stundists. They came here to break away from the Russian Orthodox Church after being persecuted. We are Baptists, not Lutherans. And so, there's a full-blooded Ukrainian, which I have somebody in my life that is full-blooded Czech, and you just don't see that very much anymore. And someone that was very important in my life that I lost, that I worked with for a long time, that is full-blooded, that was full-blooded Czech, or Bohemian in his particular case, he called it. And don't get mad at me in the Pizik area if I try to say that Czech and Bohemian are two different, that I don't acknowledge that. They're not the same. I get it, and don't take me to the woodshed on it. Derek DePau is just called. He's asked to reschedule. And so he's doing an interview before this. I want to open up the phone lines to you on our Laney's News and Views studio line at 1-800-880-5346. Somebody asked, I wonder how this will affect the North Dakota farmer who's jailed in Ukraine. We were speaking to his sisters, and her sister's attorney, his sisters, I should say, they've been asked not to speak to a lot of these issues until they get approval from their attorney. And of course, a lot of that is timely in talk radio. And so you don't get the opportunity always to meet what we have as a demand there. Another one, there are analysts on CNN and MSNBC that have said Putin played Biden like a violin. Everyone can have an option. It doesn't make them a communist. I don't believe that. I don't. You can go ahead and disagree with me on it all you want. I believe that the footprint and what's happened, in regards to Crimea is the example that you're going to give me on what Barack Obama did when it came to Crimea. Don't forget that if you go to what Condoleezza Rice has said about that era, the Bush administration sent the signal about Crimea. They sent the signal that areas of democracy are going to be supported and welcomed into NATO. And so that was the big row. That's what started things. And that's what took it down that path. As you know, the message was sent in regards to Ukraine about where that was at when it came to NATO. I don't believe that Vladimir Putin is doing this solely because he doesn't want NATO right next to him. I think that that's a driving force. I think he's doing it because he wants the old Soviet Union. He doesn't want it to be just Russia. He wants to go back to the era of when Russia, basically was fighting the Cold War. He thinks that's when it was at the strongest. To me, when we talk about sanctions, when we talk about deterrence, when we talk about all that, nothing matters as much clearly to Vladimir Putin as money. I don't believe that he would. I think he would sleep just fine at night if he saw hundreds of thousands of Russians dying in a new war over Ukraine. I don't think he values human life the same way he values what he wants Russia to be someday, and he wants his legacy to be that day. And so if you're going to deter him, if you're going to make him nervous, take care of the banks. And don't forget this, that we play a role in that too. If you froze funds, if you took away the business of Russian dollars, that's in Manhattan. A big part of that is here. The bankers here are one of the driving forces here in London, I might add, are the driving forces behind what Russia does monetarily. And so, there's always this conspiracy theory that the banks truly control this country. if you want to prove that they don't have the ultimate say when it comes to sanctions, hit Russia in the money. Punch them in the nose on the money. And that, to me, would be one of the things that I would want to see the good old U.S. of A do. Let's get to Roy. Roy, you are on News and Views. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, Joel. How are you?
I'm doing well, Roy.
Good. If you got a couple of minutes, I'd just like to take the politics out of it for a minute and just let you know I'm half Ukrainian, and I had the privilege of having a Russian professor in college at the University of Jamestown who taught me Russian and also got me on a trip to Ohio State to visit my homeland of the Ukraine. And I just wanted to relay to you the impact that flying over the Ukraine and into Kiev had on me, because the countryside was filled with potholes from the war, bombs going off, and just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And it's funny, when we went over there as Americans into Russia and into the Ukraine, they were a friendly people. They had nothing against us, and this was during Vietnam. So they could have said, "Hey, what are you doing in Vietnam?" But wholesome people. And I understand now that, over history, old people have sent young people to war to die. And it always was that way. It will be that way, and there's nothing I can do about it. But when you're visiting with people from the Ukraine, breaking bread with them, or with the Russians, we were in Moscow, they're friendly. And the people, they understand that we live in two different countries and we have two different philosophies, but it's the human toll that it takes. And the Ukrainians are tough people. There's 42 million of them. And we can fight a proxy war through Ukraine. The United States can, without setting foot in the Ukraine, just like China did with North Vietnam against us in South Vietnam. They supplied everything. So I'm just saying, there's going to be people dying, and I feel so bad because my grandfather, that's his homeland. And I had a chance to visit, and I have fond memories of that place. And I hope we have an understanding of the human toll this is going to take on people who live there. And if there is some way to stop it, I don't know if there is. That's above my pay grade. But people forget the human element, the human part of this whole thing. I just wanted to share that with you.
Totally agree, Roy. Absolutely agree. And examples of what you just said in terms of how we can fight this war without boots on the ground. Look at Afghanistan when the Russians invaded Afghanistan. The result of what the U.S. had by injecting just militarily in terms of providing equipment to the Afghans. That's a perfect example. I would also add one more thing, Roy. I had the opportunity to tour for 15 days Russia, both in Moscow and St. Petersburg through the American Legislative Exchange Council. It was a scholarship that I received. And the one thing that I will say about that is that you were 100% right on. The Russian people that I spoke to could have cared less about the U.S. They didn't care. They were friendly. They were polite. They wanted to talk about cultures. They got that. But they didn't get up in the morning and think about the United States of America.
And you know what? In our group, we always had a representative from the Soviet government. This was at the time of the Soviet government, before the breakup. We always had a representative of the government in our group watching us day and night, because that's how they was, kind of a police state. The people that met us didn't really care about that. They were warm and welcoming. Come and eat with us. Come in to the restaurant with us. Come over to our apartment. Hey, we'll go to the soccer game at Kiev or Moscow with us. Take the subway with us. And, I was on the Crimea that was overtaken by the Soviet Union in 2014 right now. We were in Yalta, where Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill met. And the people there were, again, friendly and open and loving. And so I really feel for the people of Ukraine, and their backs are against the wall. But I hope Putin doesn't underestimate the will of the Ukrainian people if they decide to defend their homeland, because I think the Russians are going to pay, unfortunately. Young men are going to die and leave families with their children alone wherever they live. But there are going to be lots of Russian soldiers dying as a result of this, because the Ukrainians are not going to give up that easily.
Well, one other thing I've got to find out from you on more of a lighter side. In my visit with Russia, whenever, other than breakfast, whenever we had a meal, there were three toasts. There was two from the sponsor, and the last one was from the guest, and all of those were a shot of vodka. And I had in my delegation, I had about a 100-pound woman from Washington State who was an office holder there. And so she couldn't handle it. So guess who did? So I ended up having about 5, Roy. So I went around half shined up for a lot of that trip.
Well, I can't speak to that, Joel, because I would break confidence with our tour guide. All I know is that Russian vodka is a lot different than American vodka. I'll just leave it at that, okay?
Yeah, let's both of us leave it at that. Thank you, Roy. Okay. Appreciate it. Let's get to our weather cave, and we'll get a chance to find out what's going on in our weather.
We'll get to the weather cave in a little bit.
Okay, let's take a call from Rick first. Rick, you are on News and Views. Go ahead, Rick.
Hey, Joel, I agree with you on something.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree. We need to hit them in the pocketbooks. And I agree with the last caller that probably 99% of the Russians and the Ukrainians are good people. And but hitting them in the pocketbooks, what's the Russians one of their biggest exports?
Oil.
Correct, oil and natural gas, and therefore we should be ramping up our oil and our natural gas.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I've always been for development of what we do with oil. I also am very, very cautious of where we do it. North Dakota is getting a huge benefit from oil prices, both in the ag sector. You've seen what ag prices are doing, what corn and soybean prices are doing. Also, we're getting a huge benefit from the crude oil that we pump. So I agree, Rick. Let's do it now. Let's get to the weather cave and visit with Don Haney. Don?
Thank you very much, Joel. Brighter today, but definitely...
Well, we're doing a food giveaway event to the community. A lot of people are facing food insecurity at this time. As we can tell, we had to start about an hour early because we just had so many people lined up. So as people come up and they need whatever they need, volunteers are taking care of it. It's all contactless, so nobody has to get out, and just making sure whatever the greatest need. We're just giving the greatest good. When we're going until the food is out. As people are coming in, if they need 2 boxes and 2 gallons of milk, that's what we're giving. We don't want to leave anybody out.
I was in the hospital, and I saw a flyer on the wall. And all the nurses were talking about taking people down there to get food and stuff. I got out last night, the hospital last night, and I said, man, I'm going to do this. When I came from Williston here, I lived on these streets for 3 years, caring. And that's what this is. That's the way I see it. Very helpful. I think it's going to be very helpful because I know people that are doing without.
I think it's truly remarkable how much need there is out there. Like I said, we were going to start at noon, but we had so many people lined up. We started at 11, and volunteers have been working their tail off since then. I'm thankful for that. I think this shows that there is some huge needs in the community, and we got some things we got to.
Thanks for watching News and Views on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and like our page, and send us a text anytime at 35270.
Hey, this is Abby Miller with the
Jenkinson, Couch Potato Radio.
Did you
see
from It Takes Two?
Doug Miller with the morning crew this morning.
News Radio.
Eiler with It Takes Two.
This is Jack Michaels, Voices Forces. Joel Heitkamp here on the Mighty
Sarah Heinrich.
Tyler Access, your home.
The Mighty 790 and 104.7 FM KFGO. The names you know, the voices you trust.
So today on the MSUM campus, we're doing an ice jam, which is we're combining a bunch of percussion instruments with ice instruments, which are also going to be used in a percussive form. We're going to hit them with mallets, hammers, all those types of things. Today is all improv, so we're all just kind of working with ideas that we just kind of think of as we go, and we kind of play off each other, and it's fun to collaborate but also have a sense of
Studio line is 1-800-880-5346. Jamie called in. Let's visit with him. Jamie, you are on News and Views. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. You touched just before we left about Putin apparently being a genius. And here's kind of what I'm seeing out of Trump and his supporters. They think Joe Biden's an enemy of the country. They think teaching about racism is evil. They think wearing a mask is the end of the world. They think that, kids who are immigrants or parents trying to save their children are the end times. But Vladimir Putin is a genius who is apparently just totally fine. It's completely insane that the former president and some of his supporters feel this way.
I want to share something with you while I have you on, Jamie, which is this. When you talk about Vladimir Putin, I think people need to keep this in mind. He has 21 presidential palaces. He's worth $1 billion. He has a fleet of 50 airplanes, 4 yachts. This man would watch people starve while he would get the benefit of it. And I don't get why we would embrace, why the Tucker Carlsons, and why the Donald Trumps would see this man as friend and not foe when you see what is happening.
It's just crazy. Vladimir Putin wants to bring the world back to a time where, when you and I grew up, where, I had a fallout shelter in my school. I grew up in Minot. Had a fallout shelter. We had to have drills in case of, a nuclear war. And while that stuff was unlikely, it was possible. And it seems like that's the kind of future that Putin wants to go back to for his people. And you're right. Why the Trump and the Fox News crowd doesn't see it for what it is. Maybe they just see him as a means to an end, which is, in the past, they clearly tried to mess with our elections, and maybe that's what they hope for in the future. I don't know. I think it's wrong, and they really should be ashamed of themselves.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. A lot of great conversation today. It really was. Tomorrow, we are going to be in Morton, North Dakota. We're going to get a chance, and thank you to Vision Forge for sponsoring, to just visit with a small town. Also, we're going to speak to a flight attendant who deals with harassment every day. Good riding with you, folks.